Welcome to the Savage Show. Let's do this.
Maybe in the last minute of your life you want to be something more than a goddamn savage!
Annunziare mentatio. Prego, some homo indomitus.
Fearless rash, insanity. He watches the game fantasy. Real one, forbidden sight. He searches under of the shadows and
You like this, girl? You like being food for the immortal?
What is happening, my savage friends? You are listening to the voice of Immortal COIL, your oracle of whiskey mysticism. Revolution is my name. Absolutely. It is Tuesday, the 15th of August, 2023, 9:32 p.m. West Coast, Seattle. And it is time to get savage. Welcome in, welcome in. I'd like to take a minute to remind you that this channel contains strong language, sensitive subject matter, images, and content intended for a mature 18 years or older audience. Viewer discretion is advised. This broadcast contains copywritten content. However, under the Fair Use Act, Section 504C2, Title 17 of the United States Code, this content is presented for the purposes of education, entertainment through the use of parody, satire, critique, analysis, and/or social commentary by means of, oh yes, subjective opinion. Stand thee forewarned. This time I'd like to invite you to hold high whatever it is you choose to imbibe and join me in the savage salute. Here's to us. What's like us? Not a goddamn thing. Tastes like the other side. Well, I'd like to thank you guys for sticking with me through not very consistent scheduling. You know, there was a time where I felt like no matter what, Wednesday or Sunday, whatever, at 9:30 p.m., I'll go on. And that's not always easy to do. And not for the sense of moving around the earth. You know, it's more like I don't want to be fake. I don't want to come to you guys with a canned topic. And I don't want it to be like, well, you know, we're going to throw the dart at the dartboard. And today we're going to talk about Bigfoot. Today we're going to talk about magic. You know, you don't need that, and I don't need to give that to you. I prefer to have these things be as organic as possible and to really come to you inspired and fired up. All the people that I look up to as far as broadcasting are the same way. And you can kind of tell when they have a case of the doldrums and they're just kind of phoning it in. And that is something that I will never do. I'd rather take the week off and like come back with something to actually talk about than blow a bunch of fucking smoke up your ass. And this is the kind of show that we say bad words on. So there we go. Right off the bat, we got RR joining us. What is up, my friend? With a frosty, tasty adult beverage there. I appreciate you showing up. I didn't give a lot of notice to this because this is one of those things that are personal and kind of close to the chest. If people show up, that's cool. If not, then it's not a big deal. I always kind of see these broadcasts as being more for like my daughter when she grows up. She's only 10 years old now and has about a 10-year experience dealing on planet Earth. Pretty smart, but still very much a kid. But at some point, the world is going to change, and whatever tutelage I can provide through a audio medium, I'm sure she will enjoy. I thought I'd do something different this week. Once upon a time, my channel was more like a social commentary kind of thing. More like I was basically trying to do one of the Star Wars channels, like all the Fandom Menace people. But I was kind of doing it with ulterior motives because I wanted to be able to cite some sort of sideways fact and then relate it to something that's high strangeness in the normal world. A good example of that would be I did a video about the Philadelphia experiment because at the end of the first season of Loki, they drop a ship, and it was the Philadelphia experiment. I think it was in Manhattan. Is that right? So I was like, okay, great. So, the ship comes from this kind of thing, and yeah, Loki. But the more I got into stuff like that, the more I felt shoehorned, and I don't feel like I was actually dropping a lot of knowledge. More or less, I was just complaining about how shitty entertainment is. But entertainment is shitty on purpose because they don't want you looking too deep into things. It's just kind of like, here, chew on some popcorn and watch this bullshit. Whereas human experience is very much more widely open than that. We have this normal waking world that we've all agreed to participate in. You set your alarm, you wake up at whatever time, and you jump in your car, and you go to work, and you perform a task. So they pay you money, and then you can buy gas and pay your bills, and wash, rinse, repeat kind of thing. But human experience and human endeavor, and especially the immortal spirit that animates our humble bodies, have a much grander experience of things and pick up life happenings that are beyond this little fiction that we weave for ourselves. There wasn't a lot of people talking about it. So what we're going to do tonight is I found an old broadcast of something called UFO Line. And this is from 1995. This features Mr. Bob Lazar, John Lear, and Gene Huff. And this is one of those things where now we take it for granted that any jerk can get on the internet and buy a microphone and then talk about flying monkeys out of his asshole. I'm a very prime example of that. But as far as the do we want to call them paranormal experiences that I have personally had, that I'm trying to figure out a way to convey to you guys, I still don't want to sit down and be like, I was born in 1981 from the age of blah 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 blah. That happened to me. I think it's better to sort of illustrate the command of that field by knowingly commentating and wisely commentating on this old podcast from 1995. So ostensibly we've had close to 30 years to place into context these things that these gentlemen were speaking of in 1995. Now, as far as me personally, I'm going to put my head on the chopping block here. I have had encounters with non-human beings most of my life. You want to call them aliens, you want to call them ETs, you want to call them whatever. I know about it. It's happened to me. There's like I said, there's close to like 35, 40 years of my own personal experience. Now, I'm not going to detail every last little bit of it on this podcast specifically. I actually was angling to get interviewed by somebody. I know some people who are like up and coming UFO journalists, and I threw out some cookie crumbs, but nobody bit. So I'm just like, what do I have to do? I guess I have to put out a little bit of my own self before interest becomes more garnered, I suppose. So I chose to do that by, we're going to listen to this podcast. I'll pause it at points, and I will interject parts of my puzzle piece, with all the little knobs and valleys, and hopefully somebody else has a sympathetic puzzle piece and will decide to prefer what they hold. I'm getting some good feedback. RR's giving me the metal horns, so I'm thinking that this isn't going to be as bad. And truthfully, I believe a lot more of us have had encounters in the paranormal realms than we let on, because we're afraid of what? Public ridicule. We're afraid of the guy at the cooler, or we're afraid that what we have to say doesn't quite so neatly fit into that little box that I talked about earlier. And truthfully, what we are doing as far as creating these little fictions that we call our lives make a lot less sense than some far out explanation of things. I apologize if my house is being loud. I live with a bunch of people. As a roommate, not by choice. So we're gonna get right into this. I'm gonna go ahead and share this thing. I'm actually gonna mute this for a second until I settle down. Inconsiderate housemates. Don't really know what I'm trying to talk about. Little green man. So it's one of those things, if you know me personally, at some point outer space and ETs and all that stuff are going to make themselves known. It's going to be a thing that you have to deal with if you want to talk to me. And that's also why I don't talk to a lot of people, because a lot of people just don't want to go there. Well, I'm going to go there. That's where I live. That's part of my experience. And it's not so fucking kooky and wacky. A lot of times when I'm evaluating the veracity of other contactees, I tend to look at how grounded they are as human beings. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean, how in command are they of their own facilities? Are they educated? Can they formulate sentences? Do they have more than two neurons to rub together? Because unfortunately, these sort of topics invite sort of not so together people. The kind of guys that want to kill themselves to ride on Hell Bob, that kind of thing. Whereas I think if you have a functional command of the topic, it proves to me that you've lived with it for a certain amount of time. And that just in the same way, like if I don't know you from Adam, all I have is your word and your seriousness about the matter. And if you're trying to make yourself overly mysterious, or you're trying to garner a cult, or you're trying to make it so that you're the only flow of information, then I would hold you in suspect. you know. But if your only line in the sand is that you won't tolerate abuse, but otherwise you're forthright, then I would tend to listen to what you have to say and evaluate it against my own experience, and then see if there's some merit there. And it's in that same sort of uh, it's in that same wheelhouse that I'm offering this information that I have. If it makes sense to you, cool. If you guys have questions, hit me up in the comments. And then just do me a favor, go ahead and thumbs up the video. I have a outside network that I'm going to post this in, and hopefully get more of the experiencers in a position where they can evaluate this information as well. So we're going to start the video here before too long. RR is saying, I remember that alien autopsy videos from the 90s. Yeah, actually, Jonathan Frakes was the host there. And he had this like fact or fiction show where it was kind of like sightings or kind of like unsolved mysteries. And they would just show weird things. But when this thing came out, and unfortunately, I do believe it's been debunked. I think that there was something about the body itself being constructed from a harness where it was lifted up off the ground and kind of put together. There are several anomalous. I don't know how to fucking speak. Organs that are removed from here. You have a telephone, you have a calendar, and then you have two quote unquote surgeons. But for an event of this size, I don't believe that they would necessarily do this in an army hospital. I think that this would be done like in a bunker, something like that. Again, I'm just speculating. I don't have any firsthand knowledge of that. But if you can think back to the time in the 40s or whatever, when this alleged event occurred, just about the most secret thing going on was the fact that we were the only country that had the bomb, and I'm speaking of the United States of America. And other countries were very interested in that, and then obviously other cultures, other planets were very interested in that. So in order to keep all of it secret, I think he would improvise a theater as opposed to just, cordoning off red section of the East Wing of Bob, Dick, and Jane's fucking hospital, right? So we're going to get into this. This is called UFO Line. Once again, Bob Lazar, who is famous for, in 1989, he came out as saying that he worked on the propulsion systems trying to back engineer it from exotic technology, meaning off-planet technology. In his briefing, Bob Lazar was told that the craft that he worked on came originally from Zeta 2 Reticuli, or Zeta 3. And he worked there for less than a year, and when his life became too complicated, he went public because he figured that the best way to hide is way out in the open. And then if somebody made an attempt on his life or tried to destroy his credibility that way, then it would lend credence to what his story had to say. Whereas if he just became another UFO kook, then the government really wouldn't have to do much to suppress what he had to say, because it would have been done in the court of public opinion. John Lear is the son of the guy who made the Learjet. He is also a UFO researcher from way back in the day. I'm not sure if he's still living or not. He is in this program, and then Gene Huff, I believe, is the host. So what we're going to do is, again, like I'm saying, we're going to listen to the show. I'm going to pause it at certain points and put in like interjections. I'm going to say what I know based off of what I have experienced as a contactee since at least the age of 9, and probably before that. But 9 is the first time I remember seeing a live being, and what an experience that was. Again, I'm an open book. Ask questions if you want to. Throw them in the chat, or just sit back and listen. And then we're going to get into it. So, UFO line, Bob Lazar, John Lear, Gene Huff. Here we go. If we do not have audio, let me know.
Good evening and welcome to UFO Line. I'm Gene Huff here with Bob Lazar. Bob, are you set for the show?
No. In fact, this is the last place I want to be tonight.
That's the spirit. Our guest tonight really needs no introduction in the Las Vegas listening area. He's got a famous family name, and he's made an infamous name for himself in UFO research. And that guest, of course, is John Lear. Welcome, John.
Thanks, Gene.
Hopefully everybody
John, I
listening
think
was
a good
born
place to start
by
might be, of all the stories that fly around about you and ufology, I think one that...
Are we jumping right into this?
Right. One that a lot of people don't know is, how did you get interested in ufology? What was the catalyst that actually made you pay attention to what's going on?
Well, you know, my dad was always talking about this stuff. He had made a sighting, and
This is John Lear.
I'd never
His
been all
dad
that
is the
much
guy that
interested
invented the Lear
because I
jet.
didn't think there was anything to it. As a matter of fact, 1980, I remember corresponding with John Andrews of Testers, that there was nothing to it. Then but I'd heard all the stories that all the guys hear. But in 1985, a friend of mine who I flew with in Laos during the Southeast Asian conflict, he flew A-10s.
I'm going to go ahead and pause this first. This video actually comes from a YouTube channel called Lazarium, and I'm going to back off so that we can highlight that. Only 844 subs. We should get him over 100, or excuse me, over 1,000. Lazarium is a very great resource for all things Bob Lazar. I found this guy the first time because I was trying to listen to an audio book. Bob Lazar wrote basically, I don't want to call it a novel. He wrote an account of his experiences at Dreamland and Test Site S4. He goes into great detail. It's like a 7-hour video. And I just, I work overnight, so I just popped in an earbud and did what I did. But yeah, Lazarium. It's a good channel. Go ahead and check him out.
He came to Nellis Air Force Base on his way somewhere, and he came up. He hadn't seen him in about 10 years. And in the conversation, I asked him where all he'd been based since I'd seen him. And one of the places he mentioned was Bentwaters, England. And that's the United States Air Force Base about 70 miles northeast of London. And I said, oh, Bentwaters. Well, that's supposedly where that flying saucer crashed in 1980. He said, no, John, not supposedly. It did. He said, I didn't see it.
Now, the way that I heard about Bentwaters, I don't know that it was a crash necessarily, but I knew that there was at least one being running around on foot that was later apprehended and supposedly interrogated and all that kind of stuff. It's interesting to speculate about if treaties exist between human governments and ET agencies. I don't believe that somebody who would come over in a flying saucer and lands represents every last little being in their colony or whatever, or their whole society. I'm not sure. ET factions seem to be as mutable to infighting as human organizations are. Maybe not in the same way, but you have to think any sufficiently evolved intelligent society would have differences of opinion that they approach with different political tools. Let's say that. So who knows? If if somebody crashed and there's a guy running around and we pick them up, maybe we give them back, or maybe you're down on planet Earth, so you're fair game. So let's put you somewhere. It's interesting to speculate about. Okay, let's continue.
Because I was confined to quarters, but I know the guys who did. And he gave me the names of Major Ted Conrad, Colonel Chuck Halt, and General Williams. And I said, what are you telling me? That this stuff is true? And he said, yeah, it sure is. And that's what started me off. So I spent the next 2 years, I thought I had known a lot of secret stuff. I worked on and off for the CIA for many years, and I thought I knew a lot of stuff. But this is one big thing I missed out. So that's what started me.
Okay, if anyone would like to give us a call, you can call 731-1230 or hit star 1230 on your cell phone. John, what's the latest? I mean, you're always good for an outrageous prediction. Why don't we get your comments on some of the recent happenings? What are your thoughts on the alien autopsy film?
This is interesting. So again, this is 1995. So they're talking about current events in our past tense, but all this stuff just happened to them. Yeah.
I think it's not real. It's just personal opinion. There's no particular reason, but it doesn't look like a real alien as if I'd seen a real alien before.
So you think somebody faked it for money?
Could be. I really don't know what the story is.
Well, Bob,
there was another sort of video that came out round about the same time, and it was called Area 51, the Alien Interview. And supposedly it was one of the gray species being interviewed by human scientists about, I don't know, gray things. And somewhere in the interview, the entity suffered a health problem, and doctors had to come in and check its nasal cavities and its eyes and all that kind of stuff. And that's another one of these things that are slightly dubious about videos that came out back then, because there was a huge market. Obviously, this is a subject that is world shaking. To people like you and me listening to this, the idea that intelligent life exists outside of the Earth is a foregone conclusion. We have telescopes that can look at planets orbiting stars, and we can tell that there's what Star Trek would call an M-class planet orbiting. And even if it doesn't have intelligent species, the chemical conditions exist for life to be present. And indeed, even in our own solar system. Many scientists, not just people, but people with like letters after their last name, hypothesize that planets like, not planets, moons of the planet Saturn and Jupiter, like Europa, harbor an ocean underneath their ice outer skin. And especially close to the core, where thermodynamic processes exist to at least have life in the temperature range that we are used to. The conditions are there. So when you take that hunger and you have a video like this, the alien autopsy or the Area 51 alien interview, there are people who have, like Stan Winston's Creature Shop, who just kind of do this stuff on the side. Now, I'm not saying that this isn't based on a true event, and it's entirely possible that videos like this get released to sort of prime the engine, so that even if this video isn't real, it's based on something. In very much the same way, I heard the story once about Steven Spielberg. He showed Close Encounters of the Third Kind to President Reagan, or incumbent President Reagan, or however that worked back then. And apparently Reagan's reaction was, this isn't actually that far off of what happened. And Steven Spielberg was kind of like, huh? And then the president was like, "Ah, never mind." But it's things like that. So, is this factual? No. But does that mean that it's not based on a real event? That's a good question. Let's continue.
Has a giant list of past John Lear predictions and statements and accusations that he'd like to go through to see which ones you still stand by and which ones you'd change your mind on. So, Bob, you want to go ahead and hit the list?
Sure, I do, James. Okay,
Thank you,
let's
Michelle.
see here. Let's start at the bottom.
We're
The driver
reacting
shot
to a
Kennedy.
Bob
The driver of the
Lazar
limo shot Kennedy. What do
radio
you think about
broadcast
I'm
from
not convinced
1985.
still not convinced that he didn't do it. Of course, everybody's dropped it by now, but I went back.
But you still think it's possible?
It's possible.
Hmm.
I went back and viewed some film that a guy had that was really close up, and he was trying to sell
What
me on
film? The only one was the Zapruder film.
Yeah, it was enlarged from one of his supposed second
So we're
or
discussing
third
Kennedy at
generation
this
films with, and he was trying to show me the pink of the driver's hands on the wheel while this supposed shooting scenario was going on. But it was
Okay, so this is a very famous thing. I first became aware of it through William Cooper. He wrote a book in the 90s, and it probably just came out when this broadcast aired, where he was talking about how in the Zapruder film, you can see that at least one of the shooters was the driver of President Kennedy's limo. And very clearly, I want to say around frame one. No. Oh, no, I gotta look it up. Career film frame 313. That's what I'm trying to say. You can see the driver turn around, aim over his shoulder. Then you see Kennedy's head concussed backwards as if he was struck from the front. Now, I'm also open to the idea that there were multiple shooters, and especially say you had the main shooter, the driver, as it were, and then you had two riflemen that were placed at various angles. This was a brand new, shocking thing back in 1995, and William Cooper, of course, his professional reputation is somewhat in question, but the fact that they murdered him, like he was murked, he was killed in his own driveway. Again, just like I was saying with Bob Lazar, it speaks to the credibility. Even if 10% of his assertions are pure bullshit, that means that there's at least 90% of the things that he said that got him killed that's worth scrutinizing. Now, maybe he's wrong, maybe he's right, but the information's out there. So do with that what you will. Okay, so yeah, we're talking Kennedy right now. Kennedy assassination.
wasn't all that convincing.
Okay. The 5 square mile roof over Area 51.
Yeah, that was
Wrong. Okay.
Okay, he's 1-1.
The 2 billion aliens living along the mountains
funny.
or inside the mountains along Highway 93.
That was pretty far fetched. I have to admit.
It's hard to believe that even you said that.
Okay, so right now Bob Lazar is just going down a laundry list of things that he knows that John Lear has commented on in the past, prior to 1995. John Lear, excuse me for a second. John Lear was one of the first modern, or I don't know how to explain this. John Lear was formative in gathering a lot of UFO lore into one common place in the late 80s, early 90s. We'll talk about it a little bit later, but there's a very famous text file that went out that benefited greatly from this man's amassed knowledge. It's something that when I was trying to make sense of myself, a lot of the things in there rang true. And I will not jump the gun on that, but we will arrive to it when we do. Let's continue.
Okay, I got to save my favorite ones for last. The underground tunnel from Boulder Dam to Area 51.
There's underground tunnels all over the place. And
So you think somewhere around the dam you can get in a tunnel and drive to Area 51 underground?
at Nellis or anywhere you want. Edwards, George Air Force.
You can drive from Boulder to Edwards underground?
It's not, I don't think you can drive it. They have these, I think they call them maglev or something.
Maglev trains, that's correct. So the way that I came to that was that they had the thing that I read said that there were nuclear powered drills that could displace approximately a mile of earth per day. There's also been things recently about inner earth that's come out, and I mean recently, like in the past 4 or 5 weeks, where they discuss how there's larger freshwater oceans underneath the saltwater surface ocean. And indeed, they contain more water than the entire surface of the planet. So apparently these drills can tunnel through the crust at, like I said, about a mile a day. And then inside these tubes, they build maglev trains. So you can literally wake up in New York City, go to work in Denver, come home, and then cook dinner and kiss your wife on the face and all that kind of stuff. In my own experience, I never was on a maglev train, but I have seen instances where military and civilian collide. And it's more like I saw uniformed military and I saw civilians in their night clothes. So if they were pulled, they were brought to a specific location to do whatever it is they do, and then put back. Now, I can't say that necessarily they were transported by maglev train, but the process is there. And the way that those in the projects like travel and transport themselves are way different than we expect. Now, in Bob Lazar's case, he says, okay, I woke up in Las Vegas and I went to a specific terminal at a specific airport. They put me on a specific plane and they flew me to where I work. And then I stayed there sometimes overnight, sometimes whatever, a couple days, sometimes just a couple hours. He did what they wanted him to do, and then they put him back. Now, the only difference between what he's describing and what I'm describing is that the people removed weren't necessarily consciously trying to do that. I hope that makes sense. So yeah, let's continue.
They got a maglev train in there?
Yeah.
You must be kidding me.
No question, no doubt about it.
Bob is a
And they built that
notorious
without anyone seeing them dig the tunnel.
skeptic.
What do they do with the dirt and the rock?
Despite what he's
Well,
had
I
his
don't
hands
think the
on.
dirt. I think it's the process of digging the holes that the dirt is decomposed. There was a
Decompose the dirt. Okay.
The patent that I showed you a couple years ago that the two Los Alamos guys got for that.
Somebody's listening to some blues or something in the background. You guys hear that? I hear like Robert Plant or something jamming.
Train or for that digging equipment that uses the same process.
But that would be a major undertaking to construct a maglev train under there.
You have no idea how far those things extend. I talked with a guy who works in L.A. with a guy who was worked at Holloman, and he talked, they talked about getting on this maglev and going different places. It's just not out here. It's all over the place. Yeah.
Which also broaches the topic for me, and this is like free association right now. Denver Airport. I'm sure everybody who is into this topic has heard a little something about Denver Airport and how there's a lot of symbolism and imagery that is basically publicly presented. No sort of attempt to hide it, and it's quite frankly shocking. And supposedly Denver itself is one of those transport hubs. So, bullet train to Denver, right?
I'm going to stick by that one.
Okay, don't call Acid Rescue. We're here with John Laird. If you want to give us a call, dial 731-1230.
Okay, let's see here. No, I don't want to say that one yet. What about the people or food for aliens? What about that old concept?
I'll probably stick by that. Yeah,
You're kidding me.
Well, not. Yeah, I'll have to stick by that.
Okay, that's very easy to skip over if you didn't hear it. He said, what about the fact that people are proof of aliens? Okay, now my assertion is going to be that the human race is alien to this planet. We have no genetic predecessors. We have at least 2,000 genetic sequences that do not exist on Earth, all the way down to the invertebrate phase. Excuse me. So that means that if we are to take Charles Darwin literally, some germ became massive tissue, and then that massive tissue grew organs, and then those organs grew a backbone, and that backbone learned how to swim, and then it crawled out of the ocean, and then it jumped into a tree, and then it grew 2 legs and started walking around and inventing tools and fire and mythology and language and culture, And I'm not saying that Charles Darwin is 100% incorrect. Evolution is a process, correct. But once intelligence gets to a point where it can scrutinize its own vessel, then it has a choice. It can choose to change that vessel or leave it be. Both have been done to us. If you look at the sacred texts in, not the Jedi Temple, but like if you look at the sacred texts of the near Middle East, like Mesopotamia, okay, we're talking about Sumer Akkad. We're talking about the things that directly influence the Bible. It will say that there was no Adam to till the soil. And Adam was being used as not only the name of an individual, but it was also used to demarcate the genome. So according to them, we're Adam. Right? So if you want to look for the reason for man's presence on Earth, you have to look at his function. What was he designed to do? That's a good question. Let's continue.
Okay. What about that little story about abductees getting these implants, and then at some point in time, someone's going to have this device that resembles a TV remote control and be able to control these guys all en masse to do whatever they want?
I'll stick by that one.
Okay. That's an interesting question, too. So Bob Lazar asks, of the abductees who get taken and have implants put in, is there any sort of substance to the idea that some master control can override their conscious will and have them perform some sort of predetermined function? in society or in the world? And those are interesting questions. So, number one, as a direct answer, baubles are no. That's not how that works. It's more akin to finding a really awesome shark in the ocean and like sticking something on its flipper so that you never lose it. Okay. Human beings who are implanted are basically, it's like a tally keeping system. No matter where you go in the solar system, you can always be located. Number two, it's not like a remote control. It's not like TiVo. It's not like a DVR. That's not how they think. It's more like a I don't know how to say that politely. It's like a tag of ownership in some ways, but they can't necessarily override your will by means of technology. There are certain engineered into the human genome to make us more manageable. Okay, if you look at the reports of contactees, and I will attest to this personally, you have instances where our awareness of where we are and the function that we're performing are shut off or shut on. What do I mean by that? Like they can dim your consciousness so that you're almost robotically performing rote functions, or you could be fully present when they need your consciousness there. Part of the deal of how humans were constructed is that we were constructed with an off switch. Because I'll tell you this, especially with species like the greys, and it doesn't matter if they're 8 foot tall greys or if they're 2.5 foot tall greys, they are physically weaker than us. We could twist their entire head around easily and carry it with us like a football. We're very frightening to them in that way. We're also very emotional. Like our emotional matrix was mixed up with an earth primate. So we have a very broad range of expression where they do not. They'd be closer to not even Mr. Spock, like worse than Mr. Spock. Because everything's an equation to them. There's a little bit of feeling there, but not like us. Not like us at all. That's part of why they feel so alien to us when we're in their presence. Because with emotion comes, how do I say this? Okay, this might sound controversial, and I'm sorry, but like if you're a man and you're dealing with a woman, she makes up her emotional reality on the spot. It doesn't matter what you say, it matters what she feels. And so is the same with a man to a certain extent, but man is a little bit more logical. But compared to entities like the Greys, we possess a similar swath as we would judge our female counterparts to possess. Does that make sense? I've heard it be said that ETs are astounded by our ability to create, and that the fact that our creations maintain shape centuries after their initial creation, because to them everything is very amorphous. They use what they use for the amount of time that they need it, and then they're able to return it to its preliminary components. It's interesting stuff. All right, let's keep going.
I'm getting scared. Okay. What about the stealth fighter? The liquid crystals on the top and bottom of the stealth fighter. So from above, it looks like the ground, and from below, it looks like the sky.
Okay, they're talking about the stealth bomber or the stealth fighter. This is the B-2. This is the thing that was used to great effect in the first Gulf War. And it's also a very big cover story for a lot of the stuff that's going on in Dream Weapon. Oh yeah, we're just working on the stealth fighter. Whatever. The exact line of thinking that Bob Lazar is citing, I believe, is apocryphal. Just because it's a stealth fighter doesn't mean it's a Klingon cloaking device or a Romulan cloaking device. You can still see them from the ground and from the sky, but if you're not necessarily looking for them, you're not necessarily going to see them. And besides, that's old tech now. Remember, this is 30 years ago. The B-2, the stealth bomber. Yeah, whatever.
You can use that on the stealth fighter, but it may have been used on another airplane.
Which airplane was that?
Too bad they can't see your expression.
Okay. 70 different species of aliens?
80.
80.
There's probably 80 have visited Earth.
Okay, well, where do you get a number like that?
From the different drawings that the people have made of the different types.
Sorry, audio issue. Bob Lazar is not asking an unfair question. Okay, he's being very pragmatic. Bob Lazar was trained in physics and has a very A plus B equals C kind of mind. But he's pointing the gun at John Lear and he's saying, where did you come up with this figure of how many races have visited us? To which John Lear says, well, the contactees are the pool of data. And he's saying it very calmly and sophisticatedly, but he's not saying it very, how do I say this? His data is not statistical in the sense that it's corroborated by hard evidence. It's basically hearsay. But the thing that I want to say to Bob Lazar is that do not circumstantial reports hold up in court of law. If I, say me and RR are in a court of law and I said, I saw RR steal a bag of Cheetos from 7-Eleven, throw him in jail. The jury would have to consider my testimony. So what John Lear is saying is that we have a certain amount of population that is reported that 80 plus different kind of races have been in contact with humanity, directly or indirectly, mostly indirectly. I don't think most ET societies would want to deal with human government. I live here on Earth and I don't even want to deal with human government, but sometimes I have to. There's one. Okay, I'm sure it'll come back to me. Let's continue.
All the drawings I've seen, with the exception, did I say that?
With the exception.
With the exception of the reptilian type guy and the pickle man.
Okay, that's it. What I was going to say before is that personally, I have encountered at least 24 different types of ET species. And this ranges from direct conversation to like, I saw this guy walking past a station on the, you know, on the ship or whatever. What I would venture, how do I say this? There are ETs that are directly involved in Earth affairs because they contributed to the human genome, which means that everything that we do is in some way tangentially related to their overall objective, whether they meant to contribute to us or not, which means that how we treat the planet is in legacy how they are treating the planet. Which is to say, like, the human species exhibits, and this is one of the things that's so fascinating about us, we exhibit every type of character trait from the dear aesthetic kind of like service to like I would die for you, to like the evil, cruelest tyrant who ever breathed the rarefied air, you know. Some of those things we were definitely taught. Some of those things were made into cultural and societal behavioral models. But for the most part, especially in this modern age, like I'm speaking now of 2023, I'm not talking about 1995 for the next few minutes. We have at our disposal the sum total of human knowledge. We have all the mythology, all the experience. We have everything that once worked and everything that does not work. And what we have now is the ability to choose. The ability to choose. What type of being do I ultimately want to become? You know, we all talk about the day the earth stood, the day the earth stood still, the day that we experience first contact. But like, what type of person do you want these people to meet? Do you want to be, I don't know, good and evil are an oversimplification. But if you were to walk up to the ramp, somebody comes down the UFO door, and you want to shake their hand, what type of person would you present yourself as? Good question.
The remainder of them look essentially the same, exactly like the grade.
No, there's books and books and books of all the different kinds.
Spirit Halloween.
Okay.
John, was that your watch alarm?
The jailer, I guess it was a jail down somewhere on the Nellis Range to put all the UFO researchers at one point in time.
Yeah, if I said that, I was a little bit off base.
But not off base with those other things.
No.
Okay. Now we're getting into my favorite ones here. Well, not yet. Reptilian, since we mentioned them.
Reptilian race, and
where does this come from?
Where did he come from?
No, where does this information come from?
So Bob Lazar again asking for the basis of John Lear's knowledge base. It's absurd to think that in the multitude of expression in the universe that multiple races could not evolve into a reptilian sentient being type. And I also want to say that just because the sentient being type is reptilian, that doesn't necessarily preclude them to evil. Okay, now good and evil are opposed to you, right? What's good for humans are evil to cows, that kind of thing. I'm not trying to make excuses or say that certain conditions that exist shouldn't. I'm just saying that if you adopt the point of view of God or the Creator, um, parameters exist that beings behave within. And how beings behave is dictated largely by the mytho-historical archetypes that exist within their brains. And different brain types have different sort of responses to stimulus. Mammals think differently than reptiles do. Avians think differently than mammals do. And then insects think differently than all of those. The type of intelligence that has to conglomerate in order to solve a world problem. Okay, so we have a population that we have to replenish, we have to feed them, we have to organize and conduct them amongst a certain ways. All those different brain types are going to come up with different solutions to similar external problems. So here's what I know. There is a reptilian race native to Earth. There is a reptilian race not native to Earth. There is a reptilian race not native to this universe. And at times they've all fought. But for the most part, there's been a quarantine placed on the planet. Okay, for a limited amount of time, while supplies last. Humans are being given a chance to show who they are, uninterfered with, because we've been guided culturally by off-world sources for thousands of years. And the past couple hundred years, when we were left alone, we came up with something like the United States of America, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. And despite the people pissed off about that, that is something we did. Count that up as a human W. All right, let's keep going.
The reason I bring up reptilians is because at one time I called, you had a UFO drawing somewhere that you showed me. And I thought it looked pretty neat and wanted to get a print of it. And you said I had to call Bill Hamilton or something like that.
Yeah.
And you gave me his number. I called and got his wife or girlfriend on the phone. And she said that Bill's not here right now. He's down the block because one of the neighbors was having some problems with a reptilian. And I thought it was a joke, and she was serious. And I said, well, what do you mean? And she said, well, he was out hassling her in the front yard. Now, this always has left an impression with me that these reptilian guys are out walking around hassling people on the street. And
well, that's in California.
I'm not familiar, or I don't remember that story, but the fact is there is a reptilian race, and
Okay, we also have to remember that Bob Lazar, after he became public, okay, so 1989, he reaches out to one of his friends that are that worked in the news, right, like the local TV news station. Pardon me. And as soon as he went public and people figured out who he was, he would have people come and like camp on his front lawn as if he was like Lord Zeldar of the, the Coneheads or whatever. Like he had all the answers just because he had an interesting job. And that's not necessarily the case. So you have to think that traumatized the man a little bit, but not not in the sense that it shut him down or made him incapable, but that it made him very much suspect other people's motivations. And truthfully, they'll get into this a little bit later on, but when you start talking about other like beings from other realms, you start touching on people's belief systems. And when you start doing that and you do it in a way that people choose to make it personal, it tends to over involve the original source of the information. So, okay, I like Star Wars. I like Luke Skywalker. So I'm going to go and sleep on George Lucas's front lawn until he comes out and pets me on the head and says I'm a good boy. It's that kind of thing. It's not very respectful to George Lucas. It's not very respectful to the medium through which he tried to inform you. But because you have some sort of unwavering belief, you bend reality towards your pre-conclusions. Does that make sense? That's what Bob Lazar is talking about.
They are around, and they don't walk down the streets. What do they? They exist.
So you think they're an advanced race?
Absolutely.
Apparently like the Greys? And
Way ahead of us.
is there any contact with them now?
Supposedly at the test site, there has been contact with a species called a reptile.
What, that they're working there in some capacity, or they're just in captivity?
They're just there. The story was related to me about a guard who had to be, or guards who had to be shown photos about 3 to 4 weeks, just flash photos of these species before they were put on duty, so that they weren't sitting there and guarding something. One of these things came walking down the hall, and these guys dropped dead of a heart attack, seeing this weird-looking thing.
Can you imagine a job like that, where you're some kid and you're told to guard hallway C, but oh, by the way, sometimes non-human entities will walk by and you are not to shoot them? Can you imagine that? I can't. And it's not even like here's residual from Reptar C, shake his hand. It's like, oh, by the way, here's a picture, and you might see something like this, but in case you don't worry about it. But in case you do, don't shoot it, because that's a scientist we have working on something. This is a jointly occupied area. Holy shit, son.
What do you have any ideas about the motivations, and what is this a joint venture with humans and the reptilians, similar to the old stories about the Greys, or exactly what is there?
I don't know what the story is. No.
I just can't buy that you believe all this stuff.
Well, when we first met
I know. I didn't believe in flying saucers.
You didn't believe in flying saucers. And
yeah, but still.
It's kind of like George Knapp saying, in some of his interviews that I have gone way overboard. You guys got to remember that I've got about a 3 or 4 year head start on you guys.
I guarantee you in 3 to 4 years I'm not going to be saying yes to these questions. Okay, Venus, nice place to live. Now,
yeah, I know you have trouble with that.
I have a lot of trouble with that because there's a sulfuric acid atmosphere. The surface temperature is close to.
Have you been there?
No, but probes have gone there from our country and other countries, Russia specifically. And
you don't think we can doctor the information? The whole point of
That's a good point. Now, Bob Lazar is directly questioning John Lear because John Lear has come forward with information that there are habitable zones on the planet Venus. Remember the X-Files? The planet Venus. Which is not outside of the realm of experience that I have had, except it wasn't Venus, it was the planet Jupiter. Now, okay, take a breath. Jupiter, yeah, whatever. Aside from what you know of it as a gas giant, there are habitable zones. There are, I don't want to call them platforms, but I mean, I guess. There are areas of terraced atmosphere, and you can do a lot with force fields, okay, where organic life is allowed to. Okay, there exists a word in our oldest language called Eden. Okay, in the Bible they talk about it as the Garden of Eden, but in Sumerian, Akkadian, cuneiform texts, it is the word E period, which means home. So they had the Ikur, the home in the mountain. They had Eden, which was the home in the faraway. Speaking of an outpost, right? So you have these little biomes they set up. And again, I have to challenge your conception of physiology, because the type of being that walks on two legs and breathes oxygen is not the only type of being that intelligently exists. There's beings that are, instead of oxygen, they're based on methane. And there's beings that instead of oxygen, they're based on hydrogen. Hydrogen is the most abundant element in the universe. It would be silly to think that there is not some form of biology that can digest and function based off of hydrogen. So typically, if you're a contactee and you're having encounters with beings that are wearing like hazmat suits and like backpacks and like helmets, and you're going to be encountering something whose physiology does not function off of oxygen. Okay, you're going to be encountering something whose physiology is, forgive the term, alien to our pressurized, heated atmosphere that exists within a temperature range of plus minus 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay. Bob Lazar is having a problem with thinking about this because he wants to relate what he experienced to the tools at his bench. And he's encountering somebody who has spoken with more people. You know, no one has 100% of the picture. That is a truism. I don't have it. I know a lot. I have a lot of perspective, but that doesn't mean I have everything. And there are things that I'm wrong about. What am I wrong about? I don't know. Only other people can say so. All right. This is turning me ridiculous.
Why would we? What is the big secret? So what if it's habitable? But
We
don't you
want
think
people to think that we are the only ones. Whoever runs the show, they want people to think that we are the only people. There couldn't be life on Mars. There couldn't be life on
Do you
Venus.
think there's life on Venus?
Probably.
Is one of them that lady?
Ooh, that's actually a good. That's actually a good point too. Native life versus installed life. So human beings are an example of installed life. We were made somewhere else. We were installed on the planet Earth to perform a specific function, and also to be mated with, apparently. But is there some sort of like jellyfish, bat fin sort of manta ray flying around in Venus's atmosphere? Probably. Why not? Life has done weirder things around volcano vents. All right, let's keep going.
He that shows up to the UFO conventions.
I don't know. But there's
What do you think the surface temperature is on Venus around the equators?
It's probably like Earth. Now,
You
I know
think
you're
it's
going to
like
give. I know you're.
What
gonna,
about the clouds?
I know you're going to give me that stuff about the clouds, and I don't know how it works. And like you say, we're dealing in opinion. You know, I don't have any facts. I haven't been there, and neither do you. But that's the famous old Bob Lazar comeback. Have you been there? No, I haven't been there, but neither have you. And you're just taking data that the government sells you on what they want you to know.
Okay.
And let's jump into it, because I know you're coming up. Atmosphere
On the moon.
and water on the moon.
Yeah.
In certain places there is. There's not a great deal, but there's enough to.
Do you think there is that 3 mile high or 30 mile high dome with that city inside?
It's a 6 mile high tower, and I don't know if there's a city inside.
Okay, this is again going back to the concept of an Eden. Okay, which is basically like a base. It's a base, just a different word.
Kind of looks like an antenna, but yeah, the evidence is pretty good that it's there. And for those that haven't heard about it, it's in the Hoagland tape Moon-Mars connection. It's about a 3-hour tape, and he goes through Orbiter, Pioneer, and a lot of the other data, and shows where this tower is. It's right directly in the center of Sinus Medai, and when the moon is full, it's in the direct center of the moon.
So do the astronauts that orbited and walked on the moon, are they aware of this and staying quiet?
Yeah, they are. And I had dinner with one of the 4.
Okay, so this is a big thing. Yes, we did go to the moon in basically paper ships. You know, the things that exist that how do I say this? We have things that could take us to the moon and back in like 10 minutes. But the public show that we were given was to sell a perception so that we wouldn't look at other things. So, yeah, Buzz Aldrin, Neil Armstrong, John Campbell, they went and did all those things. But you have to realize that was just the public face. Those were just things that we were shown to throw us off the trail. You want to read about the actual level of technology we possess. Go read Disclosure by Stephen Greer. There's some real shit in there. Let's keep going.
Psychologist that was assigned to the Apollo astronauts. And they assigned them psychologists, not so much of the weird stuff they saw, but the fact that they couldn't tell the public. And that's what bothered all of the astronauts the most. That's what sent Borman overboard and a few others. They were really bitter at NASA for not being able to tell the truth about what's going on.
Yeah, but strangely enough, Edgar Mitchell, the 6th man on the moon, came out here to visit me. And he was out because he was interested in all the UFO information, so on and so forth. In fact, even said that all the astronauts had gotten together and they have kind of a powerful group that they formed. I don't remember what they called it.
They called it the Freemasons.
He didn't mention anything along those lines.
I'm sure that in one day meeting you, he would have told his deepest, darkest secrets that NASA told him.
And we pointed that out to him also, so you do have a good point there.
Okay. I gotta look at what I didn't check off here. The driver shot.
And the final questions were done. Well, John, how about this?
Anyone else think Bob Lazar is just giving John Lear a bunch of shit? I know that they know the they know each other personally, like in their own personal lives. But it's like, okay, I'm holding you up to the public scrutiny. So, what do you think, motherfucker?
What's your current view of the big picture? I mean, now you say we've got reptilians here where they're lying to us about survivable atmospheres and temperatures on the near planets. What do you think the big picture is? I can remember, 6-7 years ago, not that you were necessarily responsible for it, but UFO researchers always have something big is going to happen at the end of this year.
Okay, the question of the big picture cannot be adequately addressed if all that you're focusing on is a physical planet in a physical universe with physical physics. I know that sounds stupid. You have to take account of spirit. You have to take account of what the creator's motivation is. You have to take account of how humanity figures into that. And you have to take account of the forward momentum of the universe. Okay. There is something fundamental to humanity's existence that begs the universal question. And it's really as simple as this. Despite being a created race, humanity can hold spirit in a way that I want to say at least 80 to 90% of other races cannot. And maybe it's our what Neil Freer calls the bicameral genes. We're part animal, but we're part God of Earth, but not like in the Earth, but not of it. That kind of thing. But if you're just looking at things from a separation consciousness, okay, if you think like little stuff packed together to build bigger stuff, and the bigger stuff is better than the stuff that came before it, then you're not really looking at the universe correctly. The way to look at it is there is a purpose to creation, and in order to flesh out that purpose, I need certain things to be in place. Therefore, the cell, the tissue, the fish, the whatever that climbs in the tree that we were talking about before. If you seek the answer to why something exists, ask about its function in your own head. And then the path forward will become clear. I need XYZ to happen, so I need ABC to exist and move around. It's pretty simple.
Something big is going to happen.
That was October 92.
And I made the mistake of making several predictions.
They're talking about Earth changes.
I have no idea what.
Man, Earth changes were like huge.
Predict a big invasion. So, what do you think the status is of the big picture? Any impending doom or business as usual?
The government guys that I know, all they can say is the next 5 years are going to be very, very interesting. But we've heard that, for the last 10 years or 20 years, whatever. So it's just kind of nice to just sit back and watch and know the stuff that we know to be real. And kind of see what's going on. Real. Well, I'm talking about the stuff you told us. I assume that's real.
So, John, what are your thoughts on the land grab out here in Central Nevada? Everyone made a big deal of it. You were among some of the first. You, Jim Goodall, Sean Morton, Gary Schultz, people like that who climbed up and viewed down on Area 51. And you...
Okay, so right now they're talking about how the military went around and bought up a bunch of land around Groom Lake because people were apparently taking their mobile homes and going and having like Area 51 vacations and like, hey, look at this tomorrow. And aside from whatever you think ships are out there, there was a very real and present, and this is 1995. So the Cold War had only been over for like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years. And aside from, like I said, ships, that's where they had like MiGs and, Russian technology and like, things that they were looking at that need to be nationally secret. I fucking hate that word, but like from a human perspective, they need to have a tangible base of operations so that they can take apart and put back together whatever it is they need to know about our human enemy. And if they can somehow shove in a flying saucer underneath that and make it like Colonel Corso's book suggests, foreign technology desk, then that's more plausible deniability. So that's what we're talking
You
about.
mentioned John.
You are in the company with John Mayer and Jim Goodall. But obviously you knew that they were keeping photographic logs of, the persistent intruders, and that led to the land grab. What do you think about all the people whining about it when they actually caused the land grab?
Oh, big deal. Area 51 is just one of many areas they've got, and they were smart to draw the attention there and get people from looking at where it was.
That's true. There were 50 other areas. If we take apart that Area 51, 50 other areas where they did whatever. And what if it goes beyond 51? What if it's like, what if we're up to like Area 620? That's interesting to consider. But actually, if you look at, and I remember reading about this once, if you look at like the, was it the Johnson's Guide, like the fucking fanny pack thing, like you pull it out and it has all the updated maps. 51 was a specific military test site, and they part and parceled out the land. Now I'm gonna have to go back and look at my sources. But 51 was specifically linked to Groom Lake and Papoose Lake.
Where other stuff is going on.
You want to go ahead and take a call?
Sure.
Okay, let's go ahead and take one. Go ahead, you're on UFO line.
Hello, hi. How you doing, fellas?
Good.
Season's greetings. Mr. Laird, I know you've been dealing with this.
Okay, I have to give a little bit of warning. Back in the day when people would call into radio shows like this, not everybody was a solid character. I don't think people were like put up to call to come off like a kook, but I also don't believe that a lot of people put a lot of forethought into the actual question that they wanted to ask the guest. I think that a lot of times they were just like, oh, I want to get on the phone. I want to be on the radio. And in the instance that you ever have a moment to speak to somebody who has a working knowledge in the field that you want to inquire, please think out your question. Because like the hardest thing is just like in front of like 10,000 people, and then you end up going like, yeah, you remember like That's a classic example on Saturday Night Live when Christopher Farley was interviewing Paul McCartney. He's like, "You remember when you were in the Beatles? Yeah, that was pretty cool, wasn't it?" And he's like, "Yeah, it was pretty cool." Did we really learn anything? It's John Connor with the Terminator. Are we learning yet?
For a while, and your father was did you have a lot of experiences when he was, growing up into the field he was into? Did he get a lot of experiences with seeing, quote, alien craft or unidentified flying objects?
That's a good question. What
He didn't have a lot of experience. My dad, for those of you that aren't familiar with his background, he founded Lear Incorporated and was chairman of the board for 30 years. They were a large supplier of components for military aircraft, and he sold us in 1960. He was involved with the government in anti-gravity research from about 1957 to about 1960 down in Fort Huachuca. And he had a couple of sightings, and lots of friends of his had a couple of sightings. It was interesting now that I look back, the people that he used to bring home are people that, were very involved with the cover-up. General Jimmy Doolittle, several of those guys that he used to bring home, and he knew a lot about it. He got a lot of criticism because he went down, I think it was to Bolivia, to sell some aircraft equipment, and he was quoted by the press as saying flying saucers were real, and he got a lot of flack over that. But like I say, he used to talk about it all the time, but it didn't interest me because I'd never seen one, and it's just, I wasn't interested. I was interested in the spy planes, the SR-71 and stuff up there.
See, my father was in the Air Force. He was in there for like 25 years, and I lived here in Las Vegas for roughly about 22 years, 23 years now. And I've had experiences. I used to live out near the Air Force Base, and back when that area was really was not much around there. You know how bad it is now, how much it's grown over there.
Yeah.
And I've had some experiences out there, like out in the Valley of Fire and stuff. I've had some experiences, and I had to go to the hospital and everything. The military hospital up there, they kept me up there for like 5 days, and taking tests on me and doing whatnot on me to find out what happened. And I know that when I came back, my parents came to pick me up from up there. My parents forgot all about it, didn't know anything about what happened.
You'll just have to evaluate what this gentleman's saying
So
with your own internal experience. I'm not here to tell you he did or didn't.
Keep them from remembering it. But I mean, it was clear as a bell. Father was really concerned at that point in time when it first happened. But after that, it's like they don't know they don't remember anything about it.
Dragon
Storm. Very good way the government does.
So we're going over a 1995 interview with Bob Lazar, all that kind of stuff, and I'm just kind of
who was with the Air
reacting
Force
to it.
and stationed at Torrance
Covering
between 1970 and 1981, and her memory for that whole time is just, there's nothing there. She has, flashes of weird stuff going on, but no real memory. Really nice lady.
See, what do you think they might have done? Do you know how they go about doing that?
No, I sure don't.
I think that's something we should find out, because if a person open up everything that quote the government's taken from the from the memory, you can just barely scratch the surface of how bad the defeat the government is performing to everyone. It's a shame to say that. I love America. I would rather be here than any place else in the world. But
So this guy is tangentially brushing upon psyops. Okay, so many of the people who are working in these black budget projects are being mind wiped or being given cover memories. I don't know that that's necessarily the direct line of questioning that this gentleman is proposing to John Lear, Gene Huff, and Bob Lazar. But it serves to say that if you are operating within a realm that is not clearly defined and you want to manage the message as it comes out, that it would behoove you to keep a very close eye on those who serve under you. And I don't mean that to sound as nefarious as it does, but that is the governing line of thought that exists within these programs.
So it's a shame that there are those people that are here that are doing these things to America and to Americans.
Yeah, well, I agree with you, but I don't think there's much hope of ever bringing this down.
That's like finding who's the person that, or at least bringing the person who really killed Kennedy to justice. That's too late for that.
We talked about Kennedy earlier.
Had to be a bad thing, but
Yeah, way too late. Way too late.
yeah, but I'm sure you probably already know who. You already have your suspicions on who.
Fuck yeah, he was.
Don't you?
And the more time that
I
passes,
already have your suspicions on who was the person.
John suspects
the more
the,
credence I
driver of
lend
the
to
Hummer.
Bob.
I'm just saying I'm not ruling the driver out.
Well, a friend of mine, his father was one of the Secret Servicemen in back for the president back then. And if you listen to the Bruder film, you can see him. He's one of the guys that's on the side of the road.
Is that right?
Yeah, and you know how like when people do a little bit of drinking, they tell you about a lot of things
Yeah.
that they're not supposed to talk about.
Right.
And then you know how they confiscated a lot of that film. He had some film and he put it on. He let us look at it. Now he told us times and dates and everything of how they were planning on having him assassinated. He knew 12 days prior to that they were going to assassinate him. They changed the whole route.
Oh yeah, there's no question
So
about that.
that's the case, and I actually, from the position I saw it, I actually saw the fatal shotgun fired from the front.
I think the curious thing about the Zapruder film is the very, 7 seconds or whatever you generally get to see, and
Frame
all of
313.
the shots before the president got there, all the shots of the grassy knoll, of everywhere, just general area shots. Someone has that somewhere. It preceded all of that on the film, and that's what.
Well, what was that photographed? Do we know that?
Well,
Yeah, there was Zapruder film taken before the little clip you had seen.
1995.
How's the grass, and around the general area?
I think I saw that on Arts and Entertainment.
yeah.
Yeah.
Huh. I didn't know that was actually photographed by him.
Yeah, I saw the I know what you're talking about too, about the driver. Bill was his name, and I know his last name and stuff like that, but he's dead now. And like I said, it wouldn't make a difference now because he's not going to be brought to trial. And
Is he dead? I thought he was alive and living in Georgia or something.
he died sometime since 91, I think. Mysteriously, from what I've heard.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks for the call.
And thank you for taking the time. And I sure hope to hear you guys show again. Maybe they can extend it to 2 hours.
Oh, I hope not.
Let's start earlier.
So once again, we're reacting to a Bob Lazar interview in
They're
1985.
advertising to you guys correctly. I think it's just like.
Well, that's kind of our fault. We really don't even feel like coming down.
It's a casual thing, but thanks for the call.
Yeah,
Hey,
thanks for
take care.
calling.
And may you guys never sleep under Rudolph with post-nasal drip.
All right.
I hate that when that happens.
Okay,
See you
thanks.
in meetings.
All right.
Bye-bye.
I miss that.
All right, what's the difference? Anyway, if you'd like to give us a call, the number is 731-1230, and if you're on a cell phone, you can hit star 1230 if you'd like to ask
Yeah, don't
John
call
Lear,
them.
Bob
This was like
Lazar,
30
or
years ago.
any of us, any questions. John, you're somewhat of a central hub. You're a high-profile guy, and a lot of people approached you to tell you stories about being abducted. And I know that a lot of people even approached you that work at Nellis Air Force Base and other places. Can I presume that you conclude by now that not all of these people can be crazy, and not all of them are searching for attention? I mean, you've seen a number of people. What about, we get asked all the time about whatever happened to John Grace, the guy that wrote those...
Vladimir Valerian.
Vladimir moved to Oregon, and he has their...
He's talking about Val Valerian. Val Valerian was a figure in the early 90s who came up with some really interesting text files. And, I mean, it was like a who's who, like a cornucopia of like high strangeness. He did a series of books called The Matrix, which I don't know if that fed into the concept of the Matrix as used by the Chomskys, and definitely not by the Tates. But it's one of the, or David Icke for that matter. But it's one of those things that for a compendium to exist in the early 90s of shit that people didn't really want to openly discuss, but nevertheless was a part of our collective experience. Val Valerian was one of those guys that you read, and I'm talking in like the early 90s. I'm talking like 93, 94, 95. I don't know if some of you guys weren't even born then. I certainly was. So this is a name that's not unfamiliar to my experience.
Real nice business going. He still writes that, I forget what the name of his magazine was, but he's doing well.
The Leading Edge.
For Nellis? Didn't he work for Nellis?
Yeah, he was
called The
a
Leading
sergeant,
Edge.
and he worked in, I'm trying to think, it's been so long ago. I was over to his office a couple times.
Huh. Well, how about the Area 51 report?
Oh, the Area 51 report.
Area 51 report.
This is going to be a weekly thing.
Boy, there's so much stuff going on. First of all, up at Groom, we have 2 new proof of concepts ready to fly. One will fly next week, and the other around March, and both are very, very fast. And you remember that helicopter we built about 10 years ago that could carry around 250 troops? Now we have one that can carry 600 fully armed combat-ready troops. And over at Sandia, they have that new, remember Sandia, that new base they built over there on Paiute Mesa. They have a new computer that is 1 billion times faster than the fastest in commercial use today. Hey, do you know who invented the internet? It was
Al Gore?
the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, and they did it in 1967. What they foresaw was the exponential use of the personal computer and saw the internet as a direct way into homes, hearts, and minds of the public. This computer up at Sandia can track what anybody ever wrote or said or
1995.
where anybody ever went on the internet with their PC. And not only that, whether your PC is on or not, they can access your hard drive anytime they want. And hey, what's going on at Tonopah? We have the new counterinsurgency airplane that's being used out at Aviano in the Bosnian conflict. The security is so tight up at TTR that now they have 3 fences instead of 1, and the entire support team, which consists of about 350 people, are billeted right out the flight line instead of back down at the gate like when the F-117 came out. And speaking of the 117A, whatever happened to the F-19? The F-19 went down the Skunk Works assembly line right next to the 117, used the same engines, 404s, but was a Navy bird and was a Batwing type aircraft. They made about 60 of them. It turns out that the F-117...
Okay. F-117, if you guys don't remember, was roughly shaped like a... it had a avian appearance. Like it was a V-shaped flying wing, if you will. But on the top, it looked like a sparrow or a robin. I'm going to see if I can find a picture of it, because it illustrates the... Go. Let's use this for a second. I fucking hate sharing art sometimes. It's not very user friendly. So this thing, you see how it looks like a robin on top, and it's a flying wing. It has the... Okay, these type of craft were cover stories for the exotic technology. Now, I'm not saying that these things don't have their usefulness, but these sort of things were made to, in your imagination, be the big top secret tech that, you know, the Russians can't use, because if they did, then the world would blow up, kind of thing. Yeah. Okay. Let's get back to levels there.
It was just a cover for this other high-techer. And whoa, what's flying out of the Northern Nevada secret facilities? It's black and it's fast. All you can see at night is a contrail, which looks like a green neon tube about a mile long. They've been doing some low-altitude work around Idaho between midnight and 4 a.m. That dude really gets along about 4,000 or 5,000 miles an hour at low altitude. And flying saucers? Apparently the aliens can't fly any better now than they could in 1947, because we recovered 2 of them in the past year right here in Nevada.
Okay, let's stop that right there. That's a hilarious statement. John Lear saying that aliens can't fly better than they used to. If we corroborate this with what, again, Colonel Corso was saying in his book, The Day After Roswell, the actual picture is that UFOs were susceptible to radar wavelengths. And it's not to say that we're shooting them purposefully in 1947 with radar. But what we're saying is that a fortuitous accident, is that how we want to say it? A fortuitous accident, brought down a pair of craft over Corona and over Roswell. These things were later weaponized, but apparently like a treaty came up where we weren't supposed to target visiting observers, which is how they describe themselves. And you know, you want to think that you're going to look at a fishbowl and you don't want to be sucked into the fishbowl. Okay, let's continue.
One came down between the dam and Kingman about a month or so ago, and one in northern Nevada last year. And that's it for the test site update. For Friday, December 22nd, 1995, this is John Lear and Bob Lazar wishing all of you at Det 1, and hey, don't want to forget you guys over at Station 9, a very Merry Christmas. Bob?
Now, who can argue with that?
Right.
No.
Well, I got to jump on the computer. Let me see that little sheet of paper. They can access your hard drive in a PC, whether or not your computer's on.
Yeah. Hard to believe.
Yeah, about as hard as you can get. Now, exactly how would they manage a feat like that?
Well, I don't know.
Aside from them coming over and turning it on.
All I'm telling you is the
1995.
What I heard.
From where did you hear that?
Bill Cooper.
Good old Bill.
We talked about Bill Cooper
but, you know,
earlier.
we named the disease that Bill Cooper got, that many of us got. It was called the UFO disease.
Right.
And the UFO disease is when you start out in this business and you hear, you know, and see some stuff that really happens, real, but you start adding on to it. And like Bill, he just got too far out. He started taking stuff that I had in my
Why
file.
does this alien autopsy thing look like a television?
In fact, maybe you should
Star Trek.
please our audience and tell them the story about O.H. Krill. That O.H. Krill
O.H.
was a name
Krill.
that you and John
Okay.
Grace had given to.
Yeah, for the people that don't.
Let's talk about that guy, O.H. Krill. Supposedly, and this is going back to some years, there are 1 or 2 survivors of the Corona Roswell crash. Okay, so whatever, you drive your UFO into the side of the mountain, and then you're like, fuck, and you have a head wound, and you walk out, and all these monkey human things come and surround you and take you home. Or not home, but like to their base. Apparently, only one survived, and that one identified themselves as Krill, and it's not like Krill. It's like they don't speak. They don't speak. It's a vibration. You know them by their vibration. OH Krill apparently stood for original hostage Krill. I don't know. Are they going to say that?
I don't know who Krill was, that John Grace, who then worked for the Air Force, wrote a treatise or something on aliens that he wanted to, felt the public should know, and I forget what it was all about, but he didn't want to put his name, so he said, well, how can we, whose name can we use? And I said, well, the Navy had an incident that they supposedly contacted an alien in the late 50s, and the name was Krill. K-R-L-L.
Department of the Navy. It's always handled through the Navy.
This guy, Krill, K-R-I-L-L, and it'll be just kind of an inside joke. And so John says, okay, and how about some initials? And I said, I don't know, pick one. He said, O-H. So then John...
Which stood for only hostage or something like that? Original hostage, yeah.
Well, that wasn't our intent. That was just picked out of thin air.
Oh, was it? Okay.
And then when Bill Cooper got a hold of this story, he had seen that in the Navy, and the OH stood for original hostage, and we just picked those initials out of thin air.
You're right, and he had read that whole report when he was there.
Yeah.
So about this flying disc that there was an alien piloted flying disc that crashed between Boulder Dam and Kingman in the last month?
Supposedly, that's what I...
And what, was it able to fly away, or did someone have to go pick it up?
No, supposedly there was some staged chemical accident or road accident or something where people were diverted from the dam for a day or so.
It's crazy to think about the state of the internet at this point. 1995.
Well, they did close. I remember in recent months they did close the dam.
Somebody told
there
me
were things that were
Laughlin and Searchlight.
I remember that
verifiable.
There was an accident with
and there were things that were just like
spill. When the guy told me this story, I was trying to think
worse than it is now. You couldn't really believe anything.
You said there were two of them.
Supposedly in Northern.
Oh,
again, you had to
why do you
weigh
think it is that these things crash?
Measure it
I'm presuming these are capable of interstellar travel, or are they some type of scout ships out of a mothership? I'm just curious as to why.
Experience of reality. It's difficult to conceive of right now because everything seems so developed and like it was always there. And there are entire swaths of people who cannot conceive of these of existence before the at your fingertips. And really, is everything at your fingertips really that desirable? Aren't some things worth working for?
They would be able to fly here from another star system and then crash so routinely.
That question's asked a lot of times. I don't know. Maybe they don't get enough simulator training.
Boy, I don't know.
So
it's so hard for me to digest.
Okay, that was almost a glazed over point. Bob Lazar asked John Lear if these things are so smart and intelligent, how come they seem to crash every, 2-3 years? I have two thoughts on that. The first one is that just because you're intelligent doesn't mean you're infallible. Things happen. So atmospheric conditions, interference by things like radar, like we discussed earlier, things that, ETs can have a bad day too, right? Maybe you didn't get enough sleep. Maybe you weren't fed properly, maybe whatever. Any number of normal operating procedures. You know, have you ever dropped something and then had to look some other direction besides the way that you're flying? You know what I mean. On your way to work. Okay. Number two, I also want you to entertain the possibility that perhaps we were granted technology. So, okay, I'm going to jump in this flying saucer. Let's use the vernacular. I'm going to purposefully crash it because I know that my body doesn't matter because I'm a drone. I'm going to purposefully crash it so that both sides are equal. Now that also necessitates a belief in an interest in human government politics, which maybe some of them have, maybe some of them didn't. These are just questions. These are just ideas. These are just things to get you thinking past your LA Fitness, 24-hour fitness existence. Think, people. I want you to think.
Yes, I mean, I can understand. Well, I'm not even going to start a fight.
So, are you? Go ahead. We'll start it here, and we can end it up in the Area 51 bar. We'll get out of here.
So, have you been welcomed back into the general UFO community? I remember, wasn't it in the early '90s that they tried to ban you from the MUFON convention here in Las Vegas?
Yeah, I hosted the MUFON
Didn't
convention.
some guy quit because you?
Yeah, a couple guys quit MUFON, and I hosted the MUFON convention here in 1989, I guess it was, and it was real popular, but I kind of was disinvited. I couldn't speak at my own hosted convention. And I did a little talking through 91, 92, but it cost me 2 good jobs. So
who knows how that feels?
UFOs
You can't even come and speak at the thing that you made.
American Transair. I was a captain there for 6 years. And they hauled me in one day and they said, "You don't actually believe in flying saucers, do you?" And I said, "Well, yeah, as a matter of fact, I do." And they said, "Well, we can't have anybody working here flying passengers and believes that." So I lost that one. Then the next one I had was with Orbital Sciences. And Orbital Sciences operates the L-1011 that carries the Pegasus rocket that launches payloads into space. And I was hired as a project pilot, and the senior project manager called me up one day and said, "John, we applied for your clearance, and I don't know what you've done, but either the U.S. Air Force or NASA wants you on this program." So that was the second job. So I kind of lied pretty low.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's also how Lazar was hosed. And then we kind of saw that on... Did you guys watch Oppenheimer? It's a decent little movie. Oppenheimer, his clearance was up for, at least in the movie. I cannot attest to the veracity of this in actual real life, but in the movie, in the dramatization, Oppenheimer's Q clearance was up for review, and they used it to set up a kangaroo court, and it turned into the basis for the movie. Bob Lazar actually quit. Like he didn't even let his credentials come into question. He just up and quit. He was like, nope. Because as soon as they threatened his family, he blew the whistle. Bob Lazar may very well be the first whistle blower. Gotta go with something.
You need to pay those bills, huh?
Absolutely.
So listen, you've been around, certainly involved with ufology as long as just about anyone. You've seen the personalities evolve, unfold, and even change. So maybe we could go down the line here and hear some gossip and exactly what your thoughts are on these people, how they started off and what their stance is now. For instance, let's start off with Stanton Friedman.
My buddy, Stan.
Obviously, Stanton Friedman did a lot of good things.
Stanton Friedman. So somebody said that earlier. Who said that? Yeah, RR said he's a little like Stanton Friedman. I don't like Stanton Friedman. There's something off-putting about him. It's not that he's a fuzzy bear. I don't care about that. It's more like I find him attempting to manage a message, and that upsets me. There's no way that this message can be managed. What it really is an attempt by humanity to discern something of ourselves. Stanton Friedman argued against that. He tried to define the context, and that upsets me.
He went to bat, certainly believes that the Earth is being visited by life from elsewhere, specializes in the old-fashioned MUFON stuff. Here's some crossed-out Freedom of Information Act documents, blah, blah, blah. In recent days on the Internet, I've seen a lot of criticism of Friedman that out somewhere he won't answer questions for people unless they buy one of his books, and he signs it, and people have attributed some sort of a change in his personality. Have you seen that?
Yeah, I haven't talked to Stan in many years. I really thought he did a good job as far as he went. What turned me on to Stan Friedman is that when Bob came out and talked about working at the test site, and Stanton was in town just about the time this was all going on up at my house, and he didn't even make the slightest, request to meet Bob or talk to him. And I wondered, here's the supposed premier UFO researcher of the century, and he doesn't even want to talk to Bob. So it kind of turned me off to Stan.
Okay, you want to go ahead and take another call?
Sure.
Let's go ahead. Go ahead, you're on UFO line.
Yes, good evening, John. Good evening, Bob. Is Gene up there?
Yes.
Well, good evening, Gene.
Good evening.
Greetings from the Billy Goodman happening. I'm not there, but Billy's going to be listening to this tape shortly. And
how you doing, Billy?
Right. Actually, the reason we decided to do this show is we missed the old Billy Goodman show here in town, and tried to get some late night talk going.
Well, you're doing an exceptional job, and I'm glad that Bob, the last time that you spoke on the air was on the happening, as far as I know. Remember?
Probably so.
Yeah.
Yeah, the old Vegas world.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
we had an afternoon show there for a short time.
Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to give you my regard.
Is Billy doing a UFO? Is the Scientific Spiritual Happening still going?
Oh, he's doing a show back out of Providence, Rhode Island.
Oh, he's still up there.
3 to 6 every afternoon, 5 days a week. WSUB out of Connecticut actually is where the station is at right now.
Mm-hmm. Well, Billy's a great host, and he was always a good time. People criticized him because he let anything go, but that provided for a fun show as he didn't pass judgment on everyone, like we're just getting ready to do right now.
Well, John, the last time I saw you was over there at El Dorado High School.
Yeah, I remember that.
And, of course, Bob came out that night, and it was nice
Not
to see.
willingly, of course.
No, of course not willingly, but at least it was nice to see you both together. So, Merry Christmas and season's greetings to you and everyone else.
All right, thanks for the call. Say hi to Billy for us.
Okay, I will.
Okay.
He'll hear this.
Okay.
Right,
thanks.
Bye.
And I did want to tell you or cover one thing. I think I told you both. I was south of town here meeting a guy on some business, and this guy grew up in New Mexico, just about 60 miles north of Farmington. He's about 70 years old, and we get to talking, and we're talking about something totally unrelated with UFOs. And in the conversation, he said that he was a roughneck for working for El Paso Natural Gas. And he started talking about seeing this thing land. And I said, what year was that? And he said, 1948. And he starts talking about a disc. And I realized I'm talking to one of the only guys that's ever come forward that was
John,
at the crash at Aztec. Now, you know that Bill Steinman wrote the book Crash at Aztec, and it's been thoroughly discredited by Bill Moore and all those guys. But there is a lot of good information, and I always believed it to be real, but I never met anybody who actually saw it. This guy was one of 5 workers at El Paso Natural Gas that were standing there in Hart Canyon when this thing crashed. It was 100 feet in diameter. It had a small hole in one of the windows that they could peek in and see. There was 4 aliens on the main deck, and apparently there was some on the lower deck. And they were there for 5 hours before the military got there and rounded them up and swarmed to secrecy and all that. And this guy has never told anybody the story in all these years. He's 70 years old now. But it was pretty interesting. I went home. I talked to him first. And I tried to see if maybe he'd read Bill Steinman's book, but no, he hadn't. So I went home and got the book and brought it back. And he read it for a couple of days, and then I came back and interviewed him. And there's some maps and drawings in Bill Steinman's book, and he told me what was true and what was false. There was a picture of a pole being poked through this hole in the window to catch the latch and open the door. And he said the pole in the book is much too big. It was a thin rod that came off one of the welding trucks with El Paso Natural Gas. He also in Bill Steinman's book, it said helicopters came there. And he said, when I was there was no helicopters. But he said it was really an interesting experience that he never told anybody about it. And it was kind of neat to meet the guy.
How was that covered up? I mean, something 100 feet in diameter, I imagine people saw that inbound, so on and so forth.
Well,
and, they must have had a cover story.
It was such a remote area. I mean, there wasn't that many people around there. This was just, in Aztec, New Mexico.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with where that is.
Well, it's east of Farmington, and it's a very desolate area.
Farmington, if I remember, is almost on the edge of the state.
The police chief was one of the guys that was there, and they briefed him on secrecy. He was later given a job in Long Beach as the police chief there for 20 years and then moved back to Farmington. And Bill Steinman interviewed him, and he just refused to talk about, just even refused to discuss the incident.
So that brings to mind what I just forgot. What's that other
left his mind at the same time?
Right.
John,
Dulce.
Okay.
No,
What are you?
Okay, now this next part, I've been heard. Sound like a southern yokel. I've heard being spoke of in several different contexts. So he said dulce. I've heard dulce. I've heard dulce. I've heard it's a Spanish word for sweet. DULCE. Dulce is how my daughter's mother would have said it. Thanks for the baby. Essentially, what we're getting into is the Dulce Wars, if you speak American. The wars that occurred underneath Arculata Mesa. And this is largely dependent on the testimony of Schneider, who said that he lost part of his arm, part of his hand, and humans and ETs engaged in crossfire engagement. So I shot at you, you shot at me back. Despite our treaty, underneath the Arculata Mesa, and it became dramatized as one of these things where hidden footage came out, and there were diagrams. It was, vats of body parts, But the idea that a misunderstanding could happen based on cultural differences, differences in interpretation of the normal idioms. I don't know how better to say that. And then it's on this guy's credibility. Do you believe him or not? I believe him. I think a hot firefight happened. I think somebody had an itchy trigger finger, and I believe it was on the human side. Because you get nervous. You get nervous around beings whose identifying presence does not match your own preconceived. It's hard to explain this. Your own preconceived notions of what is true and correct in the present occurring happening. I don't know how better to say that. I really don't. Again, it's hard to. It's really hard to quantify what it's like to be with these people. And I want to emphasize people, but I also want to emphasize be with. I am available for questions, so please just flood the stream. Okay, let's go.
Your current views on that? Do you still think that there is an underground base in Dulce? You know what story I'm referring to?
Absolutely.
The guy that got out of there and the vats of amber-colored liquids.
Beyond a shadow of a doubt. I have.
Why? You know that there have been plenty of people gone up there snooping around.
Oh yeah, and there's no signs there saying secret underground base. And the Indians.
No, of course not. But I mean, they've covered the mountains. These guys were UFO enthusiasts like yourself, and they were would have been more than happy to find anything. I mean, they didn't find any even ground disturbance.
Well, did you see any of the work that Jim Delatosa did?
No.
Well, he spent 6 weeks there with real sensitive monitors, recording monitors, and they monitored all kinds of power and stuff being generated around there. It's been 4 or 5 years.
They measure electromagnetic emissions. Is that?
Yeah, it's been 4 or 5 years since I talked about this, so I don't have a lot of this stuff off the top of my head. But it was a very good videotape on what was going on in Dulce. And
do you think anything is still there, or if it's still in existence?
Yeah, sure. The Air Force guy that I know that was there refers to it not as Dulce, but I think he called it Section D.
What about the guy from Los Alamos, whose name I can't remember either? My memory's fantastic. The guy we both. You started something Jesus and everything.
I think that's here is birthday. Okay. John, you brought Bill Murray for it, and Bill Murray always seems to take himself, even if it's transparent, trying to say he is not sponsored or approved yet. I remember George Knapp I met with a few years ago when he came up here, and more stuff he didn't believe about those our stories, but he had some information that actually there was an alien cell Central Nevada before the white man moved west. And we made jokes about how surprised the pioneers must have been when they
over in their wagon.
covered wagon like a Twilight Zone episode. And there was
Okay, so the only thing that I know that's close to what they're talking about right now are Native American tales of ant people. Okay, I have no first-hand knowledge of that, other than that I tangentially have connected that story with this one. So, Native people.
there was a flying disc base there. But what do you think Bill Moore is up to? Why do you think he feels compelled to try and squelch anything that surfaces that he is not sponsored?
I think it goes back to the cover-up where everybody thinks the Air Force is in charge. They're not. It was the Navy. The Navy's always been in charge of the cover-up, and they used the Air Force as a whipping boy. Now, the Air Force, what Bill Moore got hooked up with was AFOSI, the Air Force Office of Special Investigations, and what they were trying to find, they themselves wanted to know what was going on. So they enlisted Bill to pass around, some good information, some disinformation to ferret out the truth. And I think he got mixed up with AFOSI, and they don't know what's going on.
Mm-hmm. What was the disinformation that Bill Moore spread around?
He claims to have fabricated the Benhamwood steel and Dalsey and there's a bunch of other stuff.
Fabricated the Benhamwood steel?
Yeah. He was the one with information on Dalsey.
Huh. Okay.
So as we march down the UFO guy